All right, to discuss former President Obama's lecture, we are now joined in studio by international political expert, Dr. Charles Sankala. Charles, thank you for joining us. First and foremost, what did you think of President Obama's speech?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. The Obama speech was a good speech. I think it touched most of the areas, even areas which we never expected him to touch, sensitive areas, by indirectly trying to address Donald Trump's shortcomings.
Yes, he took some jabs at Donald Trump. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He talked about politicians lying and doubling down rather on their lies.
On their lies, yes. No, it was a good speech,
Okay, well, you were up close and personal with the president. You were right there at the Wanderers Stadium, correct?
Of course, I had to be present.
Wonderful. I wish I were you. But let's talk about some of the key points Brock talked about. He talked about economic inequality. He challenged the rich, and he used a phrase that they should understand that enough is enough. Well, enough can be enough. And he talked about the failure of government to address the inequalities in society. And what do you make of that, and what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think he's noticed that, and that's a challenge which we have, especially in Africa, that our politicians have got insatiable appetite for accumulating wealth. We are also blessed in in South Africa that we've got a Professor Pierre Lumumba, who was in Eastern Cape, where he was talking about that we've got looters on industrial scale in Africa as politicians who does not understand what is enough for them, how many houses they can have. So these are the challenges where we've got an African ideology that they fought for independence or apartheid. They were comrades, they were in exile, and they are entitled to accumulate that wealth, But the challenge and the problem continues to fight for democracy.
Now, Obama's such a diplomat. Wouldn't it have been impressive if he had actually named and shamed some leaders? What would your opinion be on that?
It could have been very sensitive, him being a diplomat, and unfortunately, this is the first time he's been in public, after leaving office in 2017. So, some leaders does not want to be approached directly. They will take that as an offense, which is the truth. They prefer to be hidden, but it's up to the community and the rest of the African continent to identify those leaders who are with those authoritarian regime, to take up that speech and action it.
Right. And my favorite part on Charles is when he talked about discrimination and immigration. And he used the French team as an example. He basically said that they didn't exactly look like French natives and that there should be some tolerance. So my question to you, in South Africa, do you think we will ever win the war over prejudice?
We will win the war, but it will take some time, I watched that game, the final game of the World Cup, and I looked at the team playing there. I mean, I couldn't hold it, but I felt shame into myself because as Africans, we've lost the self-esteem. We don't recognize ourselves as doing something better in Africa, but we always run somewhere else. And I can't blame Europe because Europe has got opportunities laid down on the tables. If somebody is identified to do something, they depict that person and they've got power and authority to give citizenship to that person, just like any other country. Right. We've heard in few months that there was a gentleman who saved the life of a child over the 4-story building. This guy came from Mali or Cameroon, if I'm mistaken. With no time, he had to run over the building 4 stories and saved that child. And Macron gave him citizenship. President Macron gave him citizenship and also gave him a job into the fire department. So these are some of the things that if we do not use our talents as Africans, somebody else is going to use them. So we can't blame them. We must identify ourselves and be proud of being African. And identifying ourselves that the only thing and better place where we can do better is within Africa. Otherwise, the world will be taking us. You know, Professor Lumumba last night, he talked about you know, we had the Belgians who came here to colonize us, the Spanish, the Italians, and all sorts of colonialism powers, the colonizers, and now we've got Chinese who are coming here. You know, we don't hate Chinese, but if we don't sit on the table as the owners of Africa, they will take advantage of us, and after 100 years from now, we'll start pointing to China that they colonized us, they took our land. You know, so these are some of the things as Africans to institute and believe in ourselves, to have that self-esteem and to be proud that we can do even better here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that was one of my favorite topics, the subject of immigration and racial discrimination. And he also touched on border security. He said it is a legitimate matter, but we can keep our humanity about it. And democracy. He mentioned Madiba in that subject. He said Madiba taught us that democracy is more than just an election, that Madiba could have been a president for life. How would you say the state of African democracy is in this day and age?
You see, looking at the day and age now, you know, Madiba spent most of his life in prison. He never enjoyed the fruits of what he sowed the seeds for, you know, which we are enjoying at the moment. I mean, spending 27 years in prison without any source to any life or freedom, not even his family. He actually gave away his whole life, you know, and coming out from that prison, he should have been the life president and nobody should have challenged him. You know, even if you talk about Obama now, he made his clean sheet. In 8 years as president of the United States of America, you know, he is a beacon as well as Mandela, a beacon of hope that Africans can do better. You know, Africans, they can challenge things and can be at the helm of power. Though most of the people expected President Obama to do more for Africa. But unfortunately, the American...
Did anyone challenge him on that?
They did. I mean, even yesterday when people commented on social media and everything that he made a lot of problems in Libya, I mean, his policies, whatever, and all that, and he never cared about the Africans. You know, the sense of entitlement in Africa, it's actually very scary because they expect everything and anything from anybody else. What they must understand that any country like America, their democracy has been wired over the period of 200 years. And that democracy, any president who comes there, they have to perform according to the guidelines of that democracy which has been written. Absolutely. So even if he can be the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, he has to be answerable to the Congress who guides him to do certain things and within the boundaries. You know, talking about the borders and the migration, you know, though he was attacking indirectly President Trump, you know, because President Trump is doing selective type of immigration, you know, where he chooses certain types of clans, you know, not to go to America and all those type of things. But at the end of the day, you don't blame United States because they've got their own country to look after, you know. All these African people who are fleeing the African continent to go to Europe to flip hamburgers and flip all those type of things which they think they can do. You know, they can do it from here and make Africa a better place.
All right. And he also touched upon the youth. He's saying the youth could do a lot more. He talked about the youth being aroused. Let's talk about South Africa. I believe I asked this question on this set before. Are our youth politically conscious? What more can they do? Where is their voice?
I like the term you used, to be aroused, you know, to be ignited, because, you know, the youths play a very major role in any country, you know, and they contribute to a certain percentage of the working class, also the unemployment. So that's where the problems are. And the youths are the ones who has, over the period of time, has overturned democracy in Africa. The agitators of apartheid, the Nelson Mandela, they were youths, you know, Tiro, they were youths, Oriba Regional Tambo, also they were youths, and many others, you know, they were in their youths, the Soweto massacre, you know, Sharpeville massacre, 1976, all those were youths. If you talk about South Africa, even the rest of the African continent, you know. So the youths of nowadays are consumed by technology, you know. They're using the social media into wrong things of posting selfies. They are drinking a bottle of wine or Jameson or any other beer, you know. They are not sharing the ideas and the problems of what they are facing based on the ideology of Nelson Mandela, what he stood for, of the man whom also inspired Barack Obama, has always admitted that the time was taken to prison, him was going to study law at Harvard. You know, he inspired him and produced that president of him in him, and he still remembers from that stage. You know, so our young people, they are not using these platforms of being inspired by the icons which we have, like Nelson Mandela was born in South Africa. South Africans were blessed to have such a leader. You know, now this time we can't ask ourselves, are we producing, do we have, is there a possibility that we have a Nelson Mandela in South Africa? We're asking ourselves that question. I mean, is there a possibility that there's a Nelson Mandela in Botswana? Is there a possibility that there's a Nelson Mandela in Zambia, in Congo, in DRC, in Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Africa, Algeria, on all the rest of African continent? Is there a possibility that we have somebody who's got that ideology?
Did you mention, is there a possibility of a Nelson Mandela in Zimbabwe?
Yes, of course, I mentioned that. Is there a possibility that we'll get a Nelson Mandela in Zimbabwe?
Okay,
You know.
and before we let you go, yes, the President Barack Obama had a great speech. It was well received. This is Mandela Day. But what kind of changes can we expect in the near future?
Yeah, you see, this is very
Politically
important.
and socially.
Exactly. This is very important. And Africa now, we must stop doing speeches. We must stop hero worshipping. You know, those heroes which we had was our privilege, you know, to look up to as our source of inspiration and strength, you know, in terms of social investment and democracy. You know, they laid down our foundation. It's up to us as people, you know, to start working and doing what we are talking about. All these speeches, we can have speeches of heroes who has passed, but what are we doing from now going forward? This is a question that governments must actually sit together into a room and start discussing, that the heroes have made us to be where we are. Is there a possibility that we have a child having a fair deal in Mvezo, where Nelson Mandela was born? Is there a possibility that in Guinea-Bissau a child has got privileges or access to education and opportunities? You know, these are some of the things which we're supposed to do. And one point I have to touch that I was equally disappointed. You know, I thought I should have seen a lot of African leaders onto that platform, because it was a platform for the good ideology. I mean, we saw a lot of presidents who came during the funeral, you know, of President Nelson Mandela, and coming here now on 200 years past his from his birth, you know, and his achievement. I mean, we should have seen people to come and preach democracy. We should have seen the invitation of Ian Kama, Robert Gabriel Mugabe here is well, he was back from Indonesia, presidents from all over Africa, you know, where even there's conflicts. They should have come there to share their views on what steps they have taken, you know, to be part and parcel of the reshaping, of the renewal, of giving hope to Africa. You know, that should have been a basis of us driving forward. You know, stop talking about the heroes. We appreciate the heroes, but we must start working and produce another Nelson Mandela. This is not the time to wait for another 100 years to produce another Nelson Mandela. The time is now to start working from this time.
Thank you, Charles. Charles Sinkala. That was our international political expert giving us his perspective on the Obama speech.